Let's say you decide to sell your house and you find out the worst possible news. You owe more on your house than it's worth. I mean, not only will you not make any profit when you sell, you would have to pay money in order to sell your house. Well, let's talk about how this happened. Well, when you find out you're upside down, one of three things have happened. Either the market has had a massive drop in prices, you paid too much when you bought the home, or you're not staying as long as you thought you would. All right, so let's take the first one. Let's talk about a massive drop in prices. Now, this does and has happened in other geographical areas, but we haven't actually seen it like in a huge way in the Dallas market. When we look at historical prices in Dallas, we see that generally speaking, prices trend up like year over year. Right? Each spring and summer, prices trend up. Then each fall and winter, prices tend to fall back, with each year ending progressively higher than the previous year. This is pretty much the way things go every year. We have had a few exceptions to the rule, such as between 2008 and 2009 when we had the Great Recession. Prices dropped by 2.8% year over year. And again, between 2010 and 2011, we saw prices drop by 7%. After that, the next time we saw prices drop was between 2022 and 2023, when we saw a 2.4% drop. Then between 2023 and 2024, when we saw a 0.02% drop. So historically, all right, we haven't really seen what people perceive to be a housing crash uniformly across the Metroplex. But we have seen at least 1 year where prices dropped by 7%. There are real estate markets that experience that kind of volatility, like huge, volatility year over year, but Dallas just hasn't been one of them. So chances are, based on historical patterns, if you're upside down, it probably hasn't come from like a massive market crash. The next possible cause is that you overpaid for the home. If you've found yourself in this position, the one big question that is most definitely coming to your mind is, why did you pay more than your house is worth? Well, you obviously wouldn't have done it intentionally, and chances are you didn't even know that you were. Like maybe your realtor didn't provide you with a comparative market analysis showing what the house was actually worth. Let me show you an example. Take the Heritage subdivision out in McClendon Chisholm. We were recently providing a market analysis for one of our clients on a home there. With this particular home, we saw that it was listed for $743,275. So what we did was we looked for sales of homes that were similar in size, location, that were also new construction, that were the same builder, and that closed within the past 90 days. Now, initially, we found a lot of home sales that were smaller, and we had to go back a bit to find sales that were comparable in size. Once we completed our analysis, there were a lot of things we could observe. The average acceptance rate was 89% of list price. So we knew right off that this was not a community you should go into offering the full list price. Also, the average accepted price was $186 per square foot. And even at that price per square foot, the seller was paying up to $18,500 towards the buyer's closing costs. So if we do the simple math of the price per square foot times the square footage, we find an estimated value in the $643,000 range. So this is on a home listed at $743,000. So it is literally overpriced by $100,000. So I hope you can see, without going through all of that research for the market analysis, it would be so easy to fall into a trap of putting way more weight onto a list price than you should. And this is especially true with new construction, where the builder might offer you like $50,000 off the price, and like $20,000 towards your closing costs. And that might sound amazing, but at the end of the day, you would still be upside down by $50,000, and you're not going to be able to sell that house for a long time. When buying a home, you have to know maybe the list price is accurate, but maybe it is completely overpriced or even underpriced. Like, you have to evaluate the home using objective numerical data if you really want to know what it's worth. Like, a common way buyers get in trouble when they don't have that market analysis done is by falling prey to what I call price shuffling. And this is a practice that's pretty common with new construction builders, and you'll occasionally see it with pre-owned homes as well. All right, let me show you how this works. Take a look at this market analysis I ran on a few new construction homes for sale in the same community. Focus on the 3 columns on the right. All right, you can see what the homes were originally listed at, what they were discounted to, and what the price per square foot is after the discount. Now, some of these have some pretty significant discounts, right? We're talking from $499,000 to $429,000. All right, that's a full $70,000 off. Or how about the third row down? An $85,000 discount right there. So that seems like an incredible deal to take advantage of, right? Well, maybe, but don't forget to notice the price per square foot column as well. Now, when I went in and ran a comparative market analysis on that top home, I saw that other comparable homes in the same community were sold at an average of $207.19 per square foot. But when I looked back at that first home, I saw that after the discount, it was listed at $270 per square foot. And again, doing the simple math, we see that a home priced at $429,000 after a huge discount is actually only worth $381,000, right? So even after like a $70,000 discount, this house is still overpriced by $48,000. So do you see, what the builder's doing here? They draw you in with these massive discounts, hoping you won't realize that they're still way overcharging you for the home. There's a lot of mind games that can go into moving prices around to trick you into thinking you've stumbled upon like an amazing deal, but it doesn't matter how steep the price reduction is. Never believe it is a good deal without a comparative market analysis. You always want to rely on solid data and solid numbers. Okay, there is another way you may have overpaid for your home. Unfortunately, in the real estate world, it's very common for buyers to be pressured into buying a home. And this can happen from many different sides, all right? Maybe even multiple sides at once. It could happen by your realtor. And really, this is the most inexcusable way for this to happen. I mean, any realtor pressuring their buyer does not understand their job. The relationship between a realtor and a client is supposed to be a fiduciary one. And this means a realtor has to put their client's needs first. And this is part of why, honestly, this is part of why realtors get a bad name sometimes. I mean, it's a whole lot easier on them if you go with the first house you see, and if they can get you under contract without a lot of hassle. I mean, think about the nature of running a business, right? You want it to be organized and streamlined, right? Moving those customers through the process like they're on a conveyor belt, right? The problem is with real estate, you have clients, not customers. And it's a service-based industry, which means you're gonna have a lot of variables. And unfortunately, a lot of times realtors kind of tend to fall into that mindset of running like a streamlined business, and it ends up being at the expense of their clients. New construction really lends itself to enabling this too. I mean, if you think about it, a realtor can get away without showing the home, right? Because there's model homes. They don't have to type up the contract because the sales consultant will do that. And if they can pressure you into thinking you're getting a great deal, or create a sense of scarcity to where you sign a contract with very little effort, that allows the realtor to move on to the next client. And there are a lot of realtors who are great at marketing and great at running a business, but it ends up coming at the expense of a client who gets pressured to buy a home. Another side you will very often be pressured from is from a sales consultant. Now let's clarify here. Unlike a realtor, they're just doing their job. Like, they don't have any fiduciary duty to you. In fact, they represent the builder, right? The builder seller. I mean, they obviously benefit if you overpay. The more the seller can make, the better. And a lot of times when we're looking up home sales in a particular community, all right, this is very common what we'll see. We'll see almost all the buyers getting steep discounts. And then you'll have like one buyer who paid 110% of the list price. So it happens a lot. So you have to remember that if you overpay for the home, that is a win for the seller. Here's the truth of it though. You should never feel pressured when buying a home. You may think you know better and wouldn't fall prey to it, but you'd be surprised at how talented some of these consultants are at subtlety. So watch for the subtle signs in yourself, all right? Is your heart beating faster? Do you feel like you have to make a decision fast? Do you feel like you may miss out on the deal if you don't act right now, right? Are you being given a deadline for a price or incentive that they're quoting? I mean, these things can seem totally normal in the moment, but always stop and ask yourself, do you even know if it is a good price? All right, because a lot of times it just ends up being like a mind game. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, we fell prey to this in the early 2000s before I became a realtor. We were investing heavily in rental properties at that time, and we made some really poor decisions. We ended up with rentals that didn't have cash flow, and we were upside down on some of them because we overpaid. And it was a hard lesson to learn. And it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate that buyers should never, ever feel pressured. Now, how about this scenario? You're upside down because you did it to yourself. You chose to overpay. And you're probably thinking that that would never happen, all right? But you'd be surprised. This happens with new builds when the buyer gets carried away with upgrades. I mean, it is so easy to overspend with structural and design upgrades. I mean, this is your dream home after all, right? And you're being given full reign to customize it to your heart's content. Also, market value can be a bit tough to peg as well for new builds because you're getting today's price on tomorrow's value. And what I mean by that is something we call equitable title. Between now and the 8 to 10 months it takes to build your home, any amount the home goes up in value is your equity because you've locked in the builder at today's prices. The danger though is that can lead you to think it's okay to overspend a little, since the home will probably be worth more by the time you close. But you should be really cautious with that kind of thinking. So how can you avoid overspending on new builds? If you know you're doing a new build, you should begin by shopping way below your final budget. The completed price of a new build is sometimes up to like $100,000 or even $150,000 above the starting price. You'll have a lot premium, structural and design upgrades, maybe even elevation fees. So plan for all of that. Okay, also, here's something to keep in mind. You are putting together a 1+1. Okay, and by that I mean lot plus house. So if you fall in love with a home, there may be numerous communities where you can have that home built. So prices for that home can vary widely. So be strategic when you have a 1+1 situation. You get to pick the house and you get to pick the location. Okay, another reason you may be upside down is you bought at the wrong time and you're selling at the wrong time. Seasonality in Dallas is a very real thing. And we see price fluctuations close to 10% from June to January every year. So if you look at the market data in Dallas, you see that happening almost every single year between June and January. Here's what you need to learn from this. To get the best deal in the Dallas market, the best time to buy is from October to December with a closing around January. January is actually the month that we consistently see the lowest home prices every year. So to close in January, most buyers will start the looking process sometime around October or November. Every year we have a lot of closing in the winter, and we've negotiated some of our best discounts in those transactions. So think about that mathematically, okay? If you bought a home in June when prices were the absolute highest and then tried to sell in the winter, you could lose 10% in equity just due to the time of the year. A full 10%, the amount of how much closing costs tend to be. And you lose that just by selling at the wrong time of the year. If you look at that in the reverse though, right? Even if you paid market value for a home, just by buying in the winter, you could start out with close to 10% in equity. All right, moving on. Another reason you may find yourself upside down is that you haven't lived there long enough. All right, so let's just say you fell in love with a home and you were willing to pay market value for it. All right, we're talking dream home status here for the home plus the location. And you didn't overpay. You paid just what the home is worth. So you buy the home and it begins its job of being a piggy bank that goes up in value, but you have to know this job takes time. And here's what you need to realize. It costs money to sell a home. You want to make a profit, but there will be closing costs and you have to take those into account. According to Texas Real Estate Source, in Texas, seller closing costs typically range from 6 to 10% of the property's contracted purchase price. They explain that sellers in Texas generally incur closing costs that range from 6 to 10%, the largest of which is agent or broker commissions. Remember that all real estate agent services and fees are negotiable. Now, they continue to say that in addition to real estate agent commissions, sellers are generally responsible for covering title fees, transfer taxes, owner's title insurance expenses, recording fees, and attorney fees. So that's a lot of fees you may not have considered when deciding to sell your house. Remember earlier when we discussed home prices and the fact that historically Dallas home values have trended up consistently over time. In a healthy market, they're not going to leap huge amounts per year. All All right, it's more like a slow creep year over year. So before you get to the point of making profit, you have to consider the 6 to 10% you have to pay for closing costs. So you need to plan to live in your home for several years to build up equity, and that includes the soft costs involved with selling. This is why when a buyer asks me, is it a good time to buy? A big part of that answer is it a good time for you to buy? And part of the answer to that question for many is it a good time to sell for you? And how long will you be able to stay in the home you're about to buy? If you have any inkling that you might be relocated with work, it's probably not a good time to buy. Or what if you might go from working remote to having to return to the office? Like, take what the commute could become into account, because you don't want to be forced to sell because suddenly you have to return to the office and now you have a 2-hour commute. Now, along those lines, if an agent tells you it's always a good time to buy, right? No, it's not. All right, you have to be able to live in the home long enough to build up equity. And there are actually many very real, valid reasons why you should never buy a home. Only one of which is you may have to move soon. In fact, I talk about that and a whole lot of other reasons in this video, which you may want to watch next. In the meantime, Wendy out.